computer. Boom. So Aparna, you said you had a help request.
Mhm.
Cool. Give us your game.
So basically, Andres and I manage a community of facilitators from around the world, different levels of expertise, different backgrounds, different countries, linguistic capabilities. It's 55 facilitators. Every 6 weeks, we're trying to do a community convening, what we call it, where we just send a calendar invite, whoever signs up, and whoever shows up, shows up. And the idea is for them to meet with each other, connect with each other, just feel like they're part of a larger community through that, stay engaged with us as a company through that process, and learn from each other potentially. So we've tried a few different things within this larger objective, but like, yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
And currently, just to kind of also add, like we do use like impromptu networking. We do kind of do some LSs, 1, 2 for all, like virtually.
We've
so we
tried Troika as well.
Yeah, so we have tried some of that, but I didn't want us to pass up this amazing opportunity to have this experience give us some ideas and suggestions.
Awesome. So just to clarify, so we're going to I'm going to work through the basic design brief that we noticed sort of helps us deliver for you guys. So the place or the context is in this environment, this community of facilitators. And it sounds like there's an open door call and that's where I get a little bit more squishy. So if you think about the outcome or intended purpose of this call, like what's the primary goal and what's the secondary goal?
I'd say the primary goal is for them to connect with each other, and the secondary goal would be for them to learn from each other. Andres, do you agree?
Yes.
So when we say connect from each other, is it a fair translation to say we're trying to build relationships, or like looking for love in all the wrong places?
Build relationships, I would say.
Sorry, I know I'm on the red team, but I have a question if I can. Break the rules. I love breaking rules, sorry. I'm just wondering, what's the issue that you have? You're bringing people together, you're connecting and so on. So what's the problem that you want to solve, or what's the issue that you want to be addressing? Where's the challenge? Yes, you invited us to speak to your challenge. So what's the challenge?
I think the challenge right now is less from a are we achieving what we are achieving perspective. It's more from a design perspective. We try so many different things. I don't like, and we have 90 minutes. We don't know if we are I don't know if we're doing a good job of it. Andres, anything for you to add on that?
I mean, I think it's where the engagement level has, like, we've had meetings where we had 5 to people. We've had people that have 10 people. Sometimes we have 1. So like we don't have a consistent number of people, and we don't know if it's, are we adding value? Like, are we really helping people connect or not? So there's, I guess, a question mark around could we be designing this in a much more intentional way to actually, help us really build the relationships of these facilitators and the connections to each other.
And that gives me another point to add, which is that because it's an open call, like Jeremy said, we have one set of people show up one time, the next it may be completely different. So you're going through the same, you're not deepening the relationships each time. There are moments where we've had where people come and they're so excited to see each other because they may have worked together, they may have been on multiple calls together, but moments where they're just like meeting someone new. So, everyone is coming into this relationship each time at a different level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any other clarifying questions?
Are there, I guess I'm on the blue team. And so am I supposed to be asking clarifying questions? A little bit.
Totally. Everybody should ask all of the clarifying questions, I noticed.
Well, I didn't understand what the difference in the blue team and the red team was then. Totally cool. So what would make you want to join if you were not the one setting it up?
I'm thinking about this. It's a good question. I think as someone in India, as a facilitator in India, I don't necessarily get to see what happens in what a facilitator in a different part of the world does. I don't get to know them, meet them, what is the cultural context. So for me to be able to facilitate a group that's not culturally similar to mine would be a challenge. And so for me, I guess if these meetings could in some way expose me to that knowledge, which I don't otherwise have access to. And the other thing would be, it's not a specific design need, but just get me more comfortable with being in a space where people are from all over the world. So
I have a follow-up question. So what wording are you using that is like the catnip to it? Is like what wording are you using that would make me go like, oh, I have to be in on that. That looks fun.
I don't think we are at the moment. At least it doesn't answer to the need that I mentioned. So that's already a valuable point. I think we just say, come meet with people, learn from each other. Here's a calendar invite. So.
Okay.
Any other clarifying questions?
Have you asked people if they're happy with how things are going, if they want to do something different, ask for feedback? Is that part of your process?
We have sometimes. We have asked what they would like to see in these activities and these meetings and things like that. Yeah, we have.
And do you facilitate all of the gatherings, or is it you invite other people to facilitate? Tell me a little bit more about your process.
Yeah, so in terms of the overall holding the space and facilitating, I usually do it and Andres supports me as well. There is the part that we have started introducing a couple of meetings ago, which is where having one facilitator do sort of a learning session for 45 minutes. And so then we kind of hand it over to them and let them take charge of that. Yeah, that's the part they facilitate directly.
How do you want them kind of like, what is your like not the dream, I don't want to say goal, because I don't want to say the goal because then we put an intention on it. It's like, what is the would be like, oh, I can't believe they're like this, it's so cool. What does that look like?
What do you mean? I can't believe they're like this, it's so cool. What do you mean by that?
This is perfect. This is not, and I don't mean perfection, I don't mean it like that, but it's just like, ah, this is what I envision. This is everybody's like doing this. What is that feeling? What does that look like when the people have that?
I'm going to answer that with a negative situation that we didn't want to happen and we recently had happen. Because when we started off, we were like a small group of facilitators. Everyone is coming through a reference. We have a really good relationship with everyone. Now we're large, and we're a small team to manage that. So we recently had one facilitator, Pamela from Kenya, reach out to us to say, I wanted to say hello. I feel disconnected from you guys. I feel disconnected from the community. And that to me, like I feel personally close to each and every one of our facilitators. So someone saying that to me was like, I didn't want that to happen. So.
And at the same time, we've had meetings with Pamela and others where like, Aparna and I are like, we feel like the mom and dad of this group in some ways. Like we feel like proud parents when we see this community come together. We had a call with like 8 different people from, Niger, Italy, Canada, US, Colombia, so diverse. And people like, particularly one of our facilitators from Haruna from Niger, she talks about like, he's such a big heart. It's like, this is like my family. I love our family. And like, you just felt this like really kind of deep sense of like belonging and connection that we have been able to achieve that, but not consistently. And I think, so that these are some of the elements also that we're playing with.
Interesting.
By the way, this is kind of also an open invitation to all of you if you want to learn more and join the community as well. So this also kind of works that way as well.
Yeah,
I was
get
just
your
going to
shill
say,
in,
it's like,
Andres.
please put the link in the chat.
Cool. Any other clarifying questions? Awesome. Then I would invite Aparna to mute yourself and turn off your camera. Andres, I think I should boot you as well, considering you're so close to it. That means I will need actually, ideally, I'd like 4 other people to join, 3 or 4, 3, 4, I mean, whoever. To join us in consultation. And look, regardless of whatever team you elected to, there are 4 people with me on the screen. So that seems perfect. So our invitation in response to this help request is, so when you think about this, the goal of creating connection and learning from one another, what structures seem relevant towards that goal, and how might we string them together to create a super awesome workshop in about 90 minutes. So what jumps out to you guys?
There's one thing that I kind of have listening to what was said is that there are basically 2 different goals that I would also approach in different ways. So one is to connect people to each other. I would approach that in one way, and other is to learn from each other. And that probably requires a bit of a different approach to setting up a liberating structure and a string. So I think you have 2 goals, but you have basically also 2 sets of answers to those things that you want to achieve. Especially the learning side, I would kind of probably take the structure as we're doing now by starting off, okay, what are the things that we want to learn? What are topics that are out there? What are challenges or things that really live in that community and that people want answers to or want help with? And take that approach. So bring it to the group. What do we want there? And that could be indeed into a wise crowd or a Troika call that we have now, that keeps it open. Or you can take that up in a more structured way, but that would then depend a little bit on the challenge that is there. That's kind of hard to say up front what you want to use there. That kind of what came to mind with me with listening to the story.
Cool, thanks. Anybody else? There's one thing that sort of jumps to mind in thinking about what you brought in, Robert, this idea of what do we want to learn, is the flip side of that seems to be what do we have on offer, right? If we have a skilled community, there, I'm sure, are a whole laundry list full of stuff that people are great at that, you know, other participants didn't even know that they wanted to learn. But hey, it turns out we have that. So one thing that jumps out at me as a structure to answer both sides of this, of this Venn diagram, is integrated autonomy, right? Not only what are the things we want to learn, but also what are the things we have on offer, and to see if we can cross those in the marketplace. You know, saying marketplace, another obvious opportunity seems to be open space. I mean, a 90-minute open space is could be a great opportunity to create a podium for these folks. Anybody else?
I think it's interesting to have a very not super structured, but somewhat structured celebrity interviews. And based on some thematic that, okay, who, much like you're doing right now, Jeremy, you know, who in the room knows what. Hey, let's have a conversation about that, and then pull up similarities with the people in the audience or challenges that they're facing and have a very similar sort of interaction as we're having right now. But in the format of an interview, you know, tell us the scenario, tell us what's going on, and what was it that you brought to that solution or that subject matter.
Oh, celebrity interview. Yeah, awesome. I notice right now that very much that our so far the structures that we're suggesting are for one half of the brief, right? That is around this shared learning. And I wonder what it is, like what is it, what is it that makes this other thing about building connection and relationship sort of hard? Is there something about it that is there a reason that we're not talking about that goal as explicitly? And what tools might we bring to bear?
I think there's one thing that's a little bit puzzling is that, and I've experienced this in many groups, is the fact that you have newcomers each time and then you have old timers each time, which already does sort of a little bit of an in-group, out-group thing that you don't necessarily want to have happen. And that's important to break that down. And so I think there does need to be a moment of perhaps ritualization, you know, some form of rituals that are identified with this group, you know, or the reason that we're here. And not anything restrictive, but some form of check-in, whatever, that is recognizable as, okay, here's how we start, here's how we wind down, here's how this will be, and please share it with whoever you bring next time so that they know what's coming up. So that there's the notion also of passing that baton, you know, and again, it should not be restrictive or prescriptive, but it would be, I think, a question of identity. You know, when you don't have the same form each time, the mass shifting each time makes it like you're going back to square one, and that can be a feeling of lost time, or a feeling of I've been there, I've seen this already, I don't need to rock up for the first 10 minutes, which is a pity because that's when you kick off the whole activity.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a dynamic with LS that because it's so scalably inclusive, right? Like when you experience it, you're like, oh, I know someone who needs to experience it, right? So you always drag, like I dragged my boss in, and it's just like you're always in, and he's dragging someone in, and everyone's always dragging someone in, and so there's a missing facilitation design in the model so far. I've seen, at least in the, you know, whatever 50 or 100 of these I've gone to on Meetup, and you know, maybe 5 or 10 in person. It's almost like a 2-track approach, if that makes any sense, where there's like, and it's not that they're segregated, it's just that they start at different paces, where somebody who is brand new, we all know the brand new phase is like, this is weird, like what's going on, like how come, and you have to go through that, right? The worst thing that I could ever imagine is, here's your cheat sheet, get rid of all those feelings. So they'll be like, oh, you've sort of destroyed, you flattened LS, it's now lame like everything else. And so you have to go through that. The only challenge is when someone's going through that, they're sort of all over the map, and you can't have them join the peloton at that point, because it is so disruptive in the ride as a group. And so, and I don't mean good disruptive, I mean, everybody just is like, okay, you know, I'm a nice person, so I'll stop my bike. And then and then the hour goes by, or the 2 hours go by, and you might have gotten like 13 minutes of something that was facilitative. So to me, that's sort of this, you know, it's almost like an accordion effect that's going on, Now, I don't believe people stay in that place very long, 1 or 2 meetings, maybe, if it sticks. If it doesn't stick, like they run away and they're freaked out or whatever, but then maybe some come back. But if it sticks, they kind of jump on the horse and away they go. So there has to be some approach here that says, as a, and I hate leveling and hierarchying and all that, but as someone who has a rubric of experience known as X, and maybe what it is, and I've been thinking about this for a while, maybe when you've gone through a string type or a structure a certain number of times, that does produce a certain, state, right? Like, I think all of us, no matter what the problem on earth in any language that we don't even speak, if someone was like, you have 3 minutes to save the world from an asteroid, can you do a 1, 2, 4 all? Like, we could all be like, yeah, sure. Like, we could just do that and not even think. Whereas somebody who hasn't done it would just be like, what's a 1, 2, 4 all? Like, wait, I don't get it. Why does 1 go first? What's a 2? And they but then once they do it 3 times, they would start saying, oh, okay, I get it. Maybe they couldn't facilitate, but they could, or maybe they're not confident to facilitate, I should say, but they could really participate. So I think there's something about the reps you've done in a structure without trying to make it a hierarchy. I've been thinking a while about how some of these other things in life, I'm not a big, I think CrossFit's a little funky, like in terms of some of the culty things to it, but they do an interesting thing with the concept of the box, if you know what that is. And it's sort of this space. Nobody's better than anybody. It's just like, you've done this exercise more, so you can help other people do it. And then you go back to doing your workout. So I actually like that part of it. And the rest of it's a little funky, but I think there's some neat stuff there as an example, where if you have experience in this, you're an E3, an experienced 3 person in this structure. And if you don't have experience, you're just an E0 because you just don't have experience yet. And very few of us have done 33 of these, or whatever you string combinations, 1,000, like nobody. So we're all E0s in a bunch of stuff. And so I think there's something there. Anyway, sorry I went off the deep end on this, but it's just something that's been piled up in me for a while around the LS process. It's almost like an ocean, right? Like the waves keep coming, they're brand new each time. But if you don't kind of go out past the initial swells, you can't get to the calmer ocean. So you always feel like it's just hitting you all the time. And I think there has to be a way. Anyway, sorry about that. Yeah.
I have an idea to respond to what Aaron just said, and I'm just thinking, I have the same problem. And I think many of us do, but it depends also how facilitaty the facilitator wants to be, because a whole lot of the point of liberating structures is, if you're doing your job well, they don't really even notice you that much. But one thing that I think is a very interesting start structure for a group that's constantly shifting and changing is to have a pole of identification that I've seen recently animated with a boat. And on this boat, you can be in the prow, you can be in the crow's nest, you can be on the back of the deck, you can be in a lifeboat behind it, and you ask the people to place themselves where they want to be during the next 90 minutes. Where do you think you fit today on this thing? Do you have a subject that you'd like to bring forward? And in that case, then, as the facilitator, you have to say, okay, I'll pair up this exercise with that situation. But you've already put people in a place in reality for them. And if they want to climb a ladder in the middle of the session, they're welcome to, or if they want to jump down and just hang out on the deck, that's fine too. But this notion of having kind of a thing that they can imagine that we're on this journey for this time in this vessel, and here's where I'm going to put myself for now. And it gives you already that unification that you want for that period of time. And I'm sure there are lots of other images that you could use, but I think that one really, really helped me with one session I was doing where people were like, nobody worked in the same function or had, there was basically, we're having a team building with people who don't even want to be a team.
Yeah, also known as every day, right?
Yes. And I get a lot of these where it's imposed, it's like telling somebody you're going to coaching, they don't want to be coached, so don't make them. But you can't force people to build a team. But when you say, okay, pick where you want to be on this boat for the next 90 minutes, well, then it's quite free and quite liberating.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think what's great about that is, what I've noticed is when something is really brand new, feels normatively strange, which a lot of stuff does to us, even if we're trying to be cooler than we are, we just don't admit it, or we're just better at branding. But but we often want to look and have the right to get really close to the glass, and then if we could just reach around, but safe, like to almost like a cat does, like it's almost like cat-like, if you know, look, if you really just kind of see how cats do things, they're these incredible sort of sensor testing, species, right? They rarely just like, oh, I see that like a dog and just dive in head first, right? They go through all this sort of iterative, figure out how safe it is. And I think we do our own version. Many of us do various stages of that. And the boat analogy is fantastic because everybody can just be hanging out with a drink on the deck, just watching. And then if they choose to put it down and kind of climb over to the side, that's their, let me see what's going on. And then there's these on-ramps. So to me, one thing I've been thinking about organizing internally, because I will do LS at work, we're doing it this afternoon, is almost like there's two tracks going on within the same larger meeting. The first track is this sort of voyeuristic track where everybody's just kind of seeing and stuff. And then the second track is like, we're cranky. Like it's people who've been here for a while, like, we're struggling through whatever we're doing. And then when someone in that track is like, hey, let me go help out, or let me take a break, or I got what I needed, let me go down to the other track and kind of serve, really. And down there say, hey, would you guys like to do a 9 Ys on this, or a 1, 2, 4 all on this? These very, I think, liberating, but very easy kind of structures to kind of jump into. And then these two things just go on. And then the people who participated in that second track, they came, they got their little liberating structure workout, they observed, and that's it. No harm, no foul. And then everybody else was still able to like really have a good session, right? Because they were able to really get what they wanted to get done, or at least began the process. And it's something I've been sort of kicking around, is to try to figure out how to put these two together, if that makes sense. Where, and of course, the people who are voyeuristic can look at the work we're doing, right? So it isn't like this is closed off. So some of that might be too complicated in terms of structure, density, but after a while, they'll start getting the ideas coming out and the documenting and say, well, how did that happen? Oh, well, because when you ask that 7th why, kaboom, you freed yourself up. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but a way to sort of parallelize this without having the commitment on the new entrance. Because I think that's the hard part when you do something new, is you're afraid of really going in and not knowing anything and just falling on your face. No matter how many times people say, don't worry, we all fall on our face. It's fun. I mean, it doesn't sound like fun when you don't know what it feels like. And I think that's the piece that, you can't force people in. They have to see, oh, wow, that didn't look too bad. Okay, let me try that one. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
I think that's interesting. I'm curious as to what Sharon is holding for us, especially on this topic around building relationship.
Yeah, thank you for nudging me out there on the floor. No, I like all of it. It's really, really interesting ideas. Love the boat metaphor. Of course, anybody who spent time with me, that I'm a big fan of Priya Parker, and with all my experiments, that you need not necessarily to say something has structure, but just to kind of be there as a presence and create an ambiance or a vessel, that people can feel it, maybe not necessarily know it, but they can feel it. And so, but giving the permission, giving permission is part of it. But as long as, people can see where the boundaries are, then they can better moderate themselves. And I use the example for myself, instead of saying boundaries or barriers, I talk about, planting snow poles. Because in the Alps, how they have poles with the black and red, depending on how deep the snow gets, you can see how many, like where you are. And it doesn't keep people from going over the edge, but where the boundaries are. And so knowing where the boundaries are, you can change them, you can go off road, but there's kind of an agreed upon. So maybe in the beginning saying where should we put the boundaries, maybe and right out of the gate, in terms of bringing a group together. This is I found before it's starting on anything is like define the boundaries of it. And it's different every time. It's different with every group. They kind of generally fall, kind of in a same pattern, but there's something about, giving permission and taking power, and because everybody's, kind of jumps in with that because they can do something, especially if they're going, oh, what the hell are we doing here? That, that gives you something to bite onto. Love the, after the boundary thing of, okay, where do you want to be on the ship? Or, that's kind of the same thing. It's like, okay, for the next 90 minutes, people can roam around, people can jump over the side. And but it's just very, very loosely, kind of not totally with an editing pen drawing the edges of it, but just kind of a, very, very lightly defining something, and then inviting people to change that as well. So it gives people the ownership a little bit, and that creates a sense of belonging. If you've been invited and you're active in setting a boundary, and so then you have kind of a stake in the game a little bit, can feel like being included and inclusive. Those are just my first thoughts on that. Yeah. Continue.
Cool. I think we got some juiciness. I want to be cognizant of the time to invite those interested in sort of red teaming, an opportunity to sort of two things sort of come to mind. So the idea of red teaming has this connotation towards critique, but which is interesting, but also I would invite whoever wants to jump into this red teaming concept to try and be very concrete about come to a specific or set or string of structures that they believe might be the best suited to accomplish this goal. So I am going to crank open I'm just going to open the same amount of breakout rooms because who cares? And I'm going to give the red team, whoever wants to jump into those, to say room 1, 10 minutes to come up with, their critique / string that they think would crush it. And I'd say anybody who wants to join into room 1 there to offer that critique / concreteness. And then I would invite Aparna to jump back into this call and to give us the game about what so far has been particularly helpful, so that we might work with her to come to a particular string of structures. Aparna, you still here with us?
Yeah.
We lose
So
you.
I should join, like I should stay here, I should join the red room.
Yeah, come back. Come.
The red room
Donna.
sounds wrong.
The red room. That's all right. The red room is a place you could go to. I'm going to move Bess into room 1 if she wants. So yeah, jump back into this fray and give us your 2 cents. So what seems particularly salient and relevant for you?
So I think a few different things. One would be just starting with how we word it. So I articulated what I would ideally want as a facilitator from a community meeting. So how are we wording it to people? I really liked what was said about, like, we have 2 separate goals that we're trying to answer through one agenda, one kind of, I don't think we always think about it as 2 separate goals that clearly. So there's more for us to work on there. There were specific liberating structures that were mentioned that I am going to look up. I mean, I am a cautious optimist, so I don't know these structures, so I have to look up to see what they are and how they make sense and how I can integrate them into the agendas. I really like what was said about the rituals, having some sort of rituals. That's an idea for us to work on. I also really like the image of the boat and the roles of people and evolving their leadership over time, asking them what they want, where they want to be the next time. Yeah, those were all the points that I made a note of and found particularly useful.
And as I take care of as I multitask, this is a bad idea. So, Aparna, what was one of the structures that you said you needed to look into?
Celebrity interviews, as well as something about what is it? Integrated autonomy.
Yeah. So integrated autonomy is literally answering 2 sides of a wicked question. So in this instance, you could go through, say, something like simple, like a 1, 2, 4 all, to come up with, hey, what's the stuff that we want to learn in this call? And a 1, 2, 4 all that might be, hey, what type of expertise is available for us to make use of in this call? And then, 1, 2, 4 all in the middle to say, hey, where do we notice we're close to each other? Whoa, high five. My son has counted to 100. Go play with Willow while Papa's working. Yeah, play with your shoes too. So that's the basics of integrated autonomy. Just starting with one side, the other side, and seeing what matches up in the middle, so to speak. A celebrity
Awesome. I like
interview. Celebrity interview is basically like it sounds. Like you would probably pick somebody either early in the call or maybe in advance of the call and generate some questions for that person. And then you would, effectively host an interview. So I've done it both ways, where first I collect questions in advance. So I would say, hey, to the group, this is the person that we're going to be interviewing. We have a Trello board, or we have a Google Doc, or send us email questions for this person that you might be interested in, and then you can sort of pool the community for the conversation in advance. And then I've also done it the other way, where I sort of live. So I start off with a list of questions that I think are sort of obvious. And then at some point I will invite folks to go into a breakout room where they will then generate additional questions for that celebrity in the interview. And both of those work. I noticed though that for this question, I really like this idea about ritual. Something that seems to be particularly low-hanging fruit that may be more work is this idea of like passing on the baton, right? So that there is an explicit expectation that, hey, and I'm horrible at this, so take it with a grain of salt, is that, I'm going to host this thing this time, but next time, like, it's up to you. And to create some explicit process around, hey, if you show up to this, you might end up with the rights to be the host for the next session as a result of this. And also it could be a fun exercise for that knowledge sharing. Could be a fun exercise for you guys, obviously in the center of this, to get to know a particular person, right? If you are continuously sort of in the co-host role, right? Obviously, then you can sort of set that vibe and then invite other folks into that process. And I think, given that your audience is facilitators, I have a strong conviction for like open space technology. Like I know for myself, like, host an open space and I will show up, because I will, I'm always dying to throw a party that I don't have to host, basically, right? You're telling me you guys will bring the chips and drinks and the pizza, and all I got to do is put on an act. Great, I can do that. And then,
So, I have a quick question. So is the objective to have a facilitator development track, or is it for people who are still very new or would like to become facilitators, or both? Because I do think it goes back to that track A, track B thing I was talking about. If it's facilitator type people, I mean, they love the combustible, obliterative, blah, 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 because they know in the end they're bouncing up and down on a trampoline. But to new people at anything, including when we're new at things that we don't know, if you go rock climbing for the first time or whatever, you don't care when people are like, oh, this is really easy, it's an XYZ. Like, in your mind, you just see risk, fear, horror, bad, I feel bad, I don't know if I want to do it. And so I think figuring out how to create a space that allows people for some self-classification is, I think, extremely important, because I do think, and I don't speak for anyone but myself, I think there's a big subpopulation that feels extremely fragile to this developing facilitation type stuff. And then there's I call them the team captain type people, who might be a lot of us here, you were a team or a co-captain on your field hockey team, or on your this or on your that. And you always put yourself out in front, however, dangerous psychologically the situation is, just because you're sort of an exploratory person. And I think you have to recognize that the reality is that's probably 20/80, like at a Pareto effect, and that there's a huge bias by people who, if we're in those buckets, or those of us that are, for people in those buckets. And the bias, I think the worst part of the bias, to be honest, is the need we have to just drag everyone into our bucket and say, trust me, it'll be great once you're here. And whether it's your sister, your brother, your anybody, and they're like, no, they're like a dog, like you're dragging a dog. And we don't, and we sort of look at that resistance as the like, that's cute, that's your resistance until you understand. And I think that's a very vicious cycle psychologically from a safety perspective. I'm just being really frank. And I think there needs to be a place where people can, by our definition, if that's who you are, people go extremely slow, but it's their speed. And that might feel extremely frustrating to a lot of people. Because they're like, how come you're still working on these 2-3 things? How come you're only doing, why aren't you leaping? Like, because everyone should just leap. It's like, well, we wouldn't have survived if that happened. You know what I mean? You need this balance between the two. So
that seems like if I was doing an open space, maybe just in 2 tracks, one being like the more adventurous user generated stuff, for the subgroup that is more who's more eager to take that risk, and also maybe a slower, more curated track that is, much more focused perhaps on, so you're new here, let's get to know folks, let's spend, let's use the, what I call the squishier relationship subset of structures, conversation,
or deliberate,
cafe, heard, seen, respected, or just bigger time boxes, right?
Yeah, or being deliberate. Because what I've learned is that there's a population that gets really experienced at these facilitation techniques. They're just very deliberate people. And so for those people who are let's go for it, the deliberates have this, and I don't mean labeling, but they have a very intellectual, robust rubric that they're reinforcing. And they really, this is their investment or part of it, and trying to just sort of disrupt that. Like I jokingly call it, it's like the Kenny G's, right? And if most people think he's a bad jazz player. They don't realize he is a like classical musician in terms of his work ethic. I mean, it's insane actually, but it's extremely deliberate. And if you try to just like throw him into something punk rock, and say, just it's fun, don't worry, Kenny, it's like, well, that's not right. It's like he has his deliberate track. Sure. And so we have to have some space, I think, for people who are very deliberate and don't just want to leap 15 structures in just because it's fun to do that. Because for them, I don't think it's a lot of fun, actually.
Thank you. So I'm curious to see what our subgroup came up with. What ideas, or what do you guys got?
It was interesting, the kind of talking about the onboarding, and right when we came back in the room and you guys were talking about 2 tracks, and my mind was there, but we ran out of time because I was saying I'm guessing you were talking about it's the certain frustration level, both for the beginners and for the people. And so it's like, how do you keep engaging those two? I don't know if that's what you guys were talking about, but I felt like we were starting leading up a little bit to that in a way. And we talked about how that there's, with the beginners, if you're going to have the beginners in there, in terms of bringing them into a community, to give permission and kind of authority over, so that they have a part of it, and planting those seeds. And so asking them to help create the boundaries of each particular time can be very, very helpful. And you can go off the track about that. Everybody can change it, but having people help set the boundaries, and then maybe go into the breakout rooms. But in the beginning, after setting the boundaries, have people say, okay, let's come up with some themes. And then people can still go to whatever room with a theme on it, but have something that you could, put your teeth into as a beginner. because it's difficult to come into a new place and you're just like, and it's more anxiety producing than comfort, putting roots of comfort, roots of, do I want to be here? Because all those things are going off in your head. So it's like, how can we first as quickly as possible establish that you even want to be there at all?
Mhm.
And it makes it easier actually to incorporate the new people as the people who are already established. Yeah, so that was kind of I'm missing some other things. Jed and Robert, do you want to continue?
Yeah, I think we also talked about, so what brings this community together? So is it this one meeting that there is every period? And kind of we're also questioning on how regular this meeting happens. It doesn't always happen at the same time, etc. But is there beyond that something that brings these people together as well? Because if it's just this once every while meeting, yeah, that's that could hinder that community forming a little bit. I again talk about all sorts of things like Slack channels, etc. And well, there are some different opinions about the usefulness of that. But yeah, but making it bigger than just a meeting can also be innate to really forming that community and getting people to interact with each other more, which ultimately is what I think leads to community forming. It's people getting together and talking to each other and finding a common interest that's that binds people together. So that's maybe not a liberating structure, but something to think about is, what is it that brings those people together?
And the other thing that came up was it's about building the community. But is it about the community, building the community? Is that the only thing it's about, or is it about the people that are coming into the community? Because there's, certain things are more inviting, to introverts or to extroverts than it is to introverts. So it's like, how can we kind of gently onboard and make space for the different, neuro preferences, neuro propensities in a situation, and maybe try and be flexible, noticing who we've got in the room, which is hard to do with a big group. Yeah, but it's like, that's part of the thing of giving permission with the themed breakout rooms, and people are watching each other, and maybe they end up in a room where they feel comfortable. That would be interesting to think about how to do that, how to make it inviting and inclusive for the.
You bring up a great point around anxiety. And if you look at sort of the drivers, not in general facilitation, just in general with people, with human beings, large groups, high volume of people they don't know, lots of activities going on, or events that they can't understand, right? And if you look at what humans do, I mean, we shut down, right? Like we run, I mean, we do all these sort of survival techniques. And so I think, like you said, there's a subpopulation, extroverts or people who are in the sort of, the facilitation cult, like us, we're like, oh, that's cool. That's we're getting, we're throwing Nerf balls at each other. Yeah, that's a cool thing. That'll evolve into 15 other things, right? Like most people will look at that and say, no, that, like, why? I don't know. That makes me feel uncomfortable. And I think there has to be an approach that allows this ramp up. And I like what you said around introverts. Or different neural capacities, or for processing, whatever. So that that people can be in very, almost like tapas plates, like in Spanish tapas foods.
Yeah.
Where they could just give me a little taste. I can watch. Maybe I come back for a little taste. You know, it's like going to a party, right? Like think about, you know, it's the same thing. You know, you go to a party, it's a bunch of unknown people. You don't sort of dive in head. I mean, there are a handful of people who do that, you know, and they're cool for them. But most people don't do that. They kind of stay on the outside edges. It's almost like that's what I would think about. How would you model? Forget about you're doing this. How would you model throwing parties every day for new people? Like use that as a rubric. You know, 20 people or 10 or 30 people parties. And what would you do? Like, would you tell everyone has to come to the center of the room? Here's your drink, start talking, enjoy. I mean, that would be like, no one's going to do that. You know, it would be mingle. You know, how do we mingle? We mingle in very small groups first, don't we? Because it makes us feel safe. Hi, how are you doing? It's very easy conversation. Oh, where are you from? Oh, what school did you go to? You know, it's all this sort of nothing conversation just because we're trying to get our leggings. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. That's actually what I've spent a lifetime doing, because as an introvert who gets overstimulated really easily, I provide multiple safe spaces. And I've been able to replicate that online, which is, you know, I'm always fascinated about that. And it's like, how do you make people feel safe? And it's almost because I'm that way. It's like, ooh, how can I? It's a cat psychology, actually. You know, like somebody was saying earlier about the cats. It's how you can't make Kitty come to you. You have to. Kitty's got to want to come. You know, so it's like, how do we set it up? Exactly what you were saying. And so the safety, but intriguing, you know, how do you pique somebody's curiosity about something? It's like this morning I jumped into a room and right out of the gate, they were like doing this like dancing, mirroring, improv thing. It's like,
that's brutal.
I got to go pick up my wife at the dentist. Bye.
I
was gone. I was gone so fast, and I felt really bad. But I just like I can't.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You really.
No, I did. I did feel bad because it's the people I have a relationship with.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, it's a come in and go out. It's kind of a thing like that. But I was just, I mean, I bailed right almost at the front gate. I'm just like, oh God, and
But that's really important that you said you did that, and you know how to do this. This is your vocation, and that was enough to trigger you. Now you take people with 2% of your experience, and it's just like click on, click off. You know, it's just like I mean, they're just gone, right?
But there's other people that will stay in it because they feel obligated. So this is really important, the thing of giving permission, that I feel very strongly about.
That's really important, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's very funny. A lot of times I've seen, because facilitation has become so broad now, it's almost like everything else. It just turns flat. That there used to be, when I used to go to a class or something, there was like almost like a working agreement. It's code of conduct, but also like a working agreement, and everyone sort of spent the first 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, and no one does that anymore. And maybe that's because we're also laid back and everything's so zoomy, but I think that was an important ritual up front.
Absolutely. It's so important
because it gave people this sense of like, oh, you have a contract for me, thank you, like thanks, I exist. And you know, and I think that's an important thing versus the let's go, it's jazz, right? Like if you look at professional jazz, like very few people can do that, to jam and just jump in. If you ever go, you know, Copenhagen or anywhere that has big jazz festivals at night, like after they've done all their shows, they show up at 1 or 2 places and they just jump in and out every 10 minutes. There's very few people who can do that in life. And the expectation that that's the standard is, I think, impossible, you know.
So I have this continuous desire to be like as concrete and as explicit as possible in response to all this. So I really like this idea of sort of starting with sort of container setting and ground rules. I think that that's a very worthy space to begin. And I think there's an opportunity to make that the first focus. So if I had 90 minutes, I might start with an extended round of impromptu networking. So instead of these 5-minute interactions, like 10 minutes per pair. So that means you'd only talk to 3 people if you wanted to, or depending on the size of the group, you could do trios. If you have a super big group, that should be doable. It's a little bit tighter, but so that first 30 minutes could be an exploration of like, all right, so what might be the ground rules that I want this call to have. So to turn that metacognitive perspective on and to generate a little bit of like, hey, for this session, this is what we think is going to be super important. I think also, if I'm really going to zoom into building relationship as the primary goal of this space, I can't in good conscience recommend almost anything but Conversation Cafe as like, all right, scale it up. You've interacted with a small group of people, with a small cohort of people, scale it up. And I like this idea about defining also this notion about defining what type of role like that you wanted to take in for this space. So this might be a particularly good exploration of like thinking about what type of developmental role or activity you want to take, very much similar to what we did at the beginning of this call, right? So what is the action that you can take that'll sort of put you out on the edge that you feel good about, but that is time boxed in such a way that maybe you can step out onto the dance floor, even if you don't like to dance, but just for one song, right? And then to sort of stick the landing, that's what I think is particularly clear for me. I think something along the lines, again, if we're going for relationship building and for mutual learning, this structure, Wise Crowds, is a really good one, and Troika Consulting as well. As after we've sort of built all of this container of safe space, like, hey, so around that developmental goal, that what's the thing that you're working on that you think is a little sticky, that you haven't had, that maybe it's not going the way you'd like it, to use all of that goodwill to generate some advice with each other. So to be as concrete as I can, if I'm going to go to stick the landing on this goal of building relationship and with a side of shared learning, I would look at a longer impromptu Conversation Cafe into some Troika Consulting. And I think we've got ourselves a pretty damn good time where I feel like I've gotten to know some folks. I have probably learned something on the shares of each other, and I may have gotten help with something that actually matters to me, if I dared bring in something that actually matters. But boom, that would be my go for.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. That's been very useful.
Well, I think I got to start dinner here. I got my son on YouTube. Yeah, see, there he is. Ik wil nog een. I want another one. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining this Wise Crowds design call. I'll upload it to YouTube and put the link on the Change Hackers meetup group if you're interested in seeing what you missed, if you had to step away or you want to share it around, something along those lines. I would like to invite everybody to Two things. The next dojo session is going to be on March the 7th, and it'll be hosted by myself, Robert, and Judy Reese. Judy Reese has a rad set of tooling around clean language, which is how to ask really great questions. Yes, I know. We'll get it in just a minute. The other thing I'd like to, I know, but first you have to wait for me. First, you got to wait. The other thing I'd like to invite everybody to is on March the 20th. I am hosting a conversation trying to find a middle space between the Liberating Structures community and Web3. So I'm trying to bring these two communities together. I think Liberating Structures have a lot to offer participants in DAOs, especially decentralized autonomous organizations. And I think that the Liberating Structures community would be well served by some form of explicit decentralized autonomous organization to help us reward contributions to the community, and also to help us fund stuff that we might determine we might want to have done. So that'll be happening on March the 20th. We'll be using Kiko Chat, the Liberating Structures. It's on the Liberating Structures shared calendar. I can drop a link onto the meetup page. So please join, especially that conversation. It's going to require a lot of brains. And Isaiah wants an Amba from Dondeza, so I'm going to have to go service him. He's an important stakeholder in my community. So thanks again for your time,
Be a
attention,
servant
and
leader
energy.
to dinner.
Thank
I'll
you.
see you
Take
guys
care.
around. Huh?
See ya.
Bye.
Or now I'll
Bye-bye.
contact you.
Thanks.
Yeah, take care. Bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye.